Chapter 15. Mosquitoes, Flies, et al. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas once remarked that horsemanship consists of the ability to remain unconcerned, comfortable, and on a horse all at once. We likewise assert that a part of wildcraft consists of knowing how to remain unconcerned, comfortable, and at the same time in a country plagued with accursed bugs. Camp sanitation. Before the Spanish-American War, we knew little about camp sanitation. At Chickamauga, where I served for 3 months with my regiment, a fifth of the command, myself included, got typhoid fever. We called it the Battle of the Sinks. The latrines were close to the kitchens and were unscreened, so flies carried the germs to the food on their feet. By 1916, we had learned most of the important facts. That year, my command, encamped most of the time on tropical service, had practically no sickness. You go camping not to prove you can survive, but to enjoy yourself. You should come back healthier than you were when you left. The matter of sanitation may sound like a tough part of your journey afield. As a matter of fact, keeping the camp healthy is simple once you've learned a few of the tricks. Besides food and water, which are considered elsewhere, these mostly concern mosquitoes, flies, and other such pests. Here's the whole story. It can make or break your vacation. Mosquitoes. Mosquito protection these days is easier than it ever has been before. This is fortunate, for the confounded buzzers are still the most common pests with which outdoorsmen are cursed. They are more or less prevalent from late May and early June until September in all country close to non-flowing waters in which they breed. They may be only slightly annoying along the trout streams in New England or in the high open country where animals seek relief. But we've also seen unbelievable millions actually blackening the sky in other regions. Our northlands and low coastal belts are usually the worst infested areas. Ernest Thompson Seton, the naturalist, kept a record of their number on a journey he made to the barren lands of Canada. On July 9, he counted 400 mosquitoes on the back of a companion's coat. He then began to establish a standard by which to gauge their number as he proceeded north. He would hold up his bare hand for 5 seconds and count the number of mosquitoes on its back. At first there were 5 to 10. Every day added to their number. In mid-July, on Great Slave Lake, where the waters of the Peace River paused before continuing down the Mackenzie to the Arctic Ocean, there were 50 to 60. Several weeks later, on a wet and treeless tundra, the figure rose from 100 to 125. There, the insects settled on his tent in such numbers, when the wind was not blowing hard, that he estimated 24,000 were darkening the outside of the canvas, while as many more hovered exasperatingly out about the door. Yet local conditions such as dryness and cold, occasionally a forest fire, sometimes operate to reduce or eliminate the mosquitoes in a particular locality. I spent one June and July in the well-watered Cascade Range in British Columbia at elevations over 4,000 feet and never saw a skeeter. The Athabasca River has always been noted as being one of the very worst mosquito rivers of the north, but a friend of mine canoeing from Jasper Park to Waterways in July of 1949 reported no mosquitoes. Last summer at Hudson Hope, the severest mosquito season in the memory of the oldest trapper and gravel punchers, got so rough that one of the few and incidentally perhaps the toughest of the prospectors who still took to the bush ditched even his packboard and rifle to get away from them. Yet this segment of British Columbia is usually so free of the hummers that some years my collaborator has camped around from spring to fall with only a tarpaulin and not even a mosquito bar. Around the first snowfall, he commiserated with a then returning neighbor of his who has a cabin a dozen miles away beside the Bugler Range, and who'd been cooking with a surly party in notoriously bad mosquito lands above Jasper to the south. But instead of the perverse little beast being proportionately thicker, there, as everyone around Hudson Hope had assumed they would be, his friend Joe Barkley reported almost none. Okay, what to expect from modern repellents. The Culex, one of the 3 general species of mosquito on this continent, is the common brute we know better than we want throughout far too much of the United States and Canada. It is not regarded as playing an important role in human disease, but it can be a blasted nuisance. In fact, this little varmint can completely spoil a camping trip if one is not prepared for it. Take along plenty of mosquito repellent. The old pine tar products, many of which also contain citronella and maybe a little creosote to lend them at least an aspect of authority, used to get all over everything and were not particularly efficacious to boot. Many individuals, therefore, used to object to their odors more than insects did. The better of the modern products are colorless, non-irritating, and nearly odorless. They really work, too, under ordinary conditions, discouraging insects from alighting and deterring most of them from biting for from 1 to 5 or 6 hours, in ratio usually to how much you perspire. They're even effective some inches away from the skin under mild conditions, keeping the majority of mosquitoes from hovering annoyingly near your ears. When skeeters are thick, though, you're going to have to rub the dope to exposed parts every half hour or so, always keeping it away from where it'll run into the eyes and mouth. You're also going to want to douse some on your clothing as well, especially around the neck and ankles. The one that between us we've found most effective in really rugged testing grounds in the Yukon, British Columbia, and Alaska is off. Any repellent should be used according to the particular instructions accompanying it, especially as some can damage plastics and synthetic fabrics. Whenever an individual happens to be allergic to one of these, as many others of preferably different composition should be tried as may be necessary. Sprays. The time that mosquitoes annoy campers most is at night. Then it is very often their sing even more than their sting. For a quiet sleep, a good idea is to give the quarters a complete going over with one of the sprays containing DDT, just before turning in, using the particular product according to accompanying directions. Even this precaution did not amount to much with the repellents that were available before the building of the Alaskan Highway, and other military construction in that corner of the continent showed a few individuals who could do something about it, that the humming multitudes were tougher threats to the dignity of man than mud, dust, muskegs, snow, or congealing cold, so intense that the hardening graphite in a pencil made only a colorless groove on paper, and paraffin melted so slowly that a candle would scarcely burn. Present insectifuges, even though they do not kill immediately, and DDT does not, make the mosquito so sluggish that he stays pretty much dormant until you can find and dispatch him, and the next morning. The stupefied insects should, in any event, be cleared out periodically, or some will revive to buzz again. The effectiveness of these preparations, and you'll usually find local stores stocking the best for their particular region, last for several weeks, in that they will sicken and eventually slay certain pests that come in contact with them, as by walking over a sprayed wall. To some extent, they discourage the presence of mosquitoes, flies, and their ilk, especially for the first hour or so. This does not mean, however, that during the height of the season in troublesome areas, you will not have to spray several times daily. During the worst of the time, keeping the dispenser by the bed will enable you to deal with any new annoyers with scarcely an interruption in your snoozing. The better of these sprays are useful too in ridding an individual's clothing of mosquitoes before he enters sleeping or living quarters, and for assuring him a certain brief amount of protection when he is about to leave camp. They should in general be kept away from skin, food, animals, and open flame. Any repeated, prolonged, or excessive inhalation of the fumes is also inadvisable. Other measures. Smudges of damp and green wood and vegetation will discourage mosquitoes and flies around camp, making it possible to cook and eat meals without having bugs in everything. If you travel with horses, they will find much comfort when standing in such smoke, which they soon learn to seek. A smudge may be very irritating to eyes and nose, but often it is far preferable to continual skeeter and fly attacks. If an individual happens to get caught out without matches or dope in bad country, perhaps as a result of a plane crash, plastering his exposed skin with mud can even save his life. Locating camp. In mosquito country, do not camp on the edge of a brook or along a lake shore or in thick woods. Get higher up, as far from non-running water as is convenient, and in the open where wind will carry mosquitoes and flies away. Often you will be immune on small islands or in points of land extending well into open water. A high cut bank above a mountain river is usually good, so is an open ridge or high meadow near a small clear spring. Insect-proof tents. For spring and summer camping where insects are bothersome, and for all seasons in the tropics, tents with screen doors and windows will help to retain a lot of the joys of camping in the open. The door net commonly is made to open and close with a zipper, or there may be a hole in its center that is controlled with a puckering string. Either arrangement is an exasperation, slow to get in and out through, and an invitation for swarms of mosquitoes. A much better technique is to have a very full net sewed to the junction of the front and the walls, so that it will fall in a loose drape long enough for at least a foot of it to lie along the floor cloth. You simply lift the net, walk in or out, and let it drop after you. If skeeters are thick, you go in and out on your knees. It becomes the adopted etiquette in many backwoods localities for an individual to rid himself of any mosquitoes either by spraying or by standing in a smoke before coming into the living quarters. When the net is not needed, tie tapes can be used to hold it up out of the way. If the tent does not have a sewed-in floor, a sod cloth should be weighted down all around during fly season. You may want also to put down a separate ground cloth that will lap over the sod cloth from all sides. A bar for mosquitoes. With lean-to and other open shelters, a mosquito bar may be erected over the sleeping bag and its bottom edges tucked under the mattress. One way to put it up is atop stakes driven in at the four corners of the bed. Another method is to suspend it from the roof. Thin flexible poles, too, may be bent and thrust into the ground on either side of the sleeping bag in such a way that they will curve over the upper half of it in an arc reminiscent of the roofs of the old covered wagons. This framework may be covered with a large piece of cheesecloth, large enough to drape on the ground for at least a foot all around, protecting the exposed upper part of the body. Clothing in fly season. Clothing in mosquito country should be such that mosquitoes will not be able to bite through it. You may even need garments that can be tied or otherwise fastened tightly around neck, wrists, and ankles. You'll want to avoid at the same time fabrics that don't breathe. Some of the new synthetics are particular offenders in this respect, making you feel after a mile or so as if you've been immersed in a steam bath. A loose shirt made from one's own deer skins is, we've found, especially pleasant to put on along toward evening. It is not too warm if you wear nothing underneath it. Mosquito head nets may be purchased which droop from the broad brim of a hat down over the face and head and either tuck in at the neck or preferably extend over the shoulders to tie under the arms. Easiest to see through is black. Amber is practical too. Incidentally, blue is the color most attractive to the skeeters. Gauntlet gloves, either leather or canvas, may be necessary. Both these and hat are abominably warm in summer, but where mosquitoes are notably savage and aggressive, as in parts of the Arctic, they can be far preferable to the incursions of the winged pests. Even in the worst country, however, it is very often possible to stay comfortable by keeping to open ridges and along broad streams where there is usually a breeze. Preventing malaria. Malaria, yellow fever, and occasionally other diseases are transmitted to human beings by mosquitoes. Anyone going into the southernmost portions of the United States to Mexico or the tropics should know what mosquitoes carry these diseases, how they transmit them, and the precaution to be taken. There are 3 general species of mosquitoes in America. The Culex is the common tormentor of the northern United States, Canada, and Alaska. When at rest or biting, its body is nearly parallel to the surface, to which it inclines the rear tip of its abdomen. It is a very annoying pest, and its bite is irritating, but it does not play an important role in human maladies. The malaria mosquito belongs to the genus Anopheles, a night flyer not ordinarily about in the daytime. It is found in large numbers in the southern United States and the tropics. When it rests on a surface such as your skin, it carries the rear of its abdomen elevated. That is, it assumes such a tilted position that it more or less appears to stand on its head to bite. Only the female of the species sucks blood, the males being vegetarians. In order to infect you with malaria, the female must first feed on some human being, or in extremely rare instances, a monkey suffering with malaria. It must then, within 10 days or so, bite you. As they are night flying, and as they seldom go over a mile from where they are born unless carried by a heavy wind, it is possible under certain conditions to avoid infection. When exploring in Panama, where the rainforest is full of Anopheles mosquitoes, I invariably camped at least a mile from any human habitation. Furthermore, none of us ever approached a settled area after nightfall. As a result, neither I nor any of my men ever got malaria, for the only mosquitoes we encountered were not infected. I did once get malaria myself on another occasion, when I was bitten by an infected mosquito while marching through a native village at night during a maneuver. The garrisons in the Canal Zone, as well as the large modern cities and popular tourist resorts in South America, are practically free from mosquitoes, but a large majority of the inhabitants of the smaller towns and villages in our tropics have malaria in their blood, and most of the mosquitoes there are carriers of malaria. It is difficult, if not impossible, for a sportsman visiting our tropics to avoid being in or near such settlements at some time or other at night. Unless he takes particular precautions, he is therefore apt to become infected with the malaria parasite, which multiplies in the red blood cells, destroying more and more of them and causing progressive anemia and recurrent chills followed by high fever. When there is danger or probability of malaria infection, there are certain preventative or precautionary drugs that you can take. The old prophylactic was 5 to 20 grains of quinine taken daily after the evening meal. Atebrin, known commercially as atabrine, was later largely substituted for this bitter extraction from cinchona bark, partly because many individuals are allergic to quinine, which for a time was in short supply. The atebrin dose is from 1/2 to 2.5 grains taken 6 days a week just before dinner. The trouble with both quinine and atebrin is that neither will protect you from becoming infected with malaria. Both anti-malarial drugs merely prevent the disease from reaching an active stage while you are taking either. When you stop the dosage, you are almost sure to come down with a full-fledged case, provided, of course, that you have become infected in the meantime. Of course, when this happens, you are probably out of the woods and within reach of medical treatment. The most effective preventative for malaria at this writing, a very recent medical development, is 5/10 grain of camoquin hydrochloride followed by 15 milligrams of primaquine diphosphate, taken in a single dose daily for 14 days by members of the white race. Deeply pigmented patients may take similar dosages under close medical supervision for possible toxicity, at which they should be discontinued. This is now in use in our army and apparently kills the malaria parasite so that there is no after development of the disease and no recurrence. Ask your physician about those of these drugs, which under various trade names are now on the market in tablet form. Park and Davis & Co. is a supplier for the Army. Free vaccinations against yellow fever. Yellow fever, a most dangerous and often fatal disease, is carried in much the same manner as malaria by mosquitoes of the genus Andes, formerly called Stegomyia. These are also southern and tropical insects. In the Americas, happily, yellow fever has been pretty well stamped out. Where it does not exist, these mosquitoes have no chance to become infected and hence do not become carriers. Now, too, there is a successful inoculation against yellow fever, but if you have not been inoculated and get in a region where there is an epidemic, the best thing to do is to hightail it out of there pronto. In these days of ever-quickening transportation, mosquitoes of various genera, some of them potential carriers of these diseases, and others such as dengue and filariasis, are liable to reach our shores. There have been rare instances of disease occurring in the United States from such sources of infection. However, while some while such mosquitoes may be brought here, most of them, particularly the Aedes, cannot establish themselves within themselves where frost occurs. Vaccination against yellow fever is recommended as a health precaution for travelers to infected localities, especially if these journeyers are sportsmen who expect to go into the wilderness. Yellow fever exists in the Americas as far north as Honduras and Trinidad, and as far in the other direction as the southern extremity of Brazil. Although many areas free of yellow fever lie within these limits, international travelers who within 6 days of their arrival in a receptive area have come from or passed through an area which is considered infected with yellow fever are required to present a valid certificate of vaccination against yellow fever. One of these remains in effect for 6 years, beginning in this hemisphere 10 days after the date of the standard single inoculation. Immunization against this disease cannot usually be obtained from private physicians. The U.S. Public Health Service, Washington 25 D.C., will furnish without charge a list of the usually free yellow fever vaccination stations in the United States, their hours, fees in the few instances there are any, and other pertinent information. Ask for the free pamphlet, Immunization Information for International Travel. If the supply of these happens to be exhausted, the same publication may also be secured from the Superintendent of Documents, Government Printing Office, Washington 25 D.C. at 25 cents per copy. Sportsmen and tourists visiting almost all foreign countries except Canada, including even the interior of Mexico, must be immunized against certain diseases before they are allowed to return from such countries. Immunization is also often a requirement for foreign entry. Some of the recommended inoculations require more than 2 months for completion, so measures should be taken in plenty of time before you plan to leave the United States or Canada. Chiggers, jiggers, chigos, and redbugs, which are all the same pestiferious little biting mites, annoy us chiefly in the southern half of the United States, particularly along the lower coastal belt of the southern Atlantic states and in the tropics. So small they are difficult to see with the naked eye, they penetrate inside the clothing. Their bite is bright red and the size of the head of a pin. It is not painful, it is only slightly irritating if left alone, and if a daily bath with soap is taken. Some individuals find, too, that calamine and Benadryl hydrochloride lotion afford them relief from bothersome itching. In any event, the main thing is not to scratch the bites, which may then become infected. I found they did not trouble me except right at the top of my shoes, where the continual friction of walking irritated them. Anointing my ankles and socks with a repellent did some good in stopping them from nipping there. Dusting the skin and underclothing with powdered sulfur or dimethyl sulfate did also afford some immunity. I came up from Panama to the United States in 1916 on a short leave, and while here I was ordered up for examination for promotion. When the medical officer who was to go over me physically got a look at my hide, he exclaimed, "What's the matter with you? What disease have you got?" I responded that so far as I knew, I was physically fit. "Well, what are these red spots over every inch of my body?" "Oh, those," I replied. "Those are just red bug bites. I've been in the field in Panama for a year. Best thing to do about chiggers is to forget them and don't scratch." Ticks. Ticks are usually found where chiggers are. They are also troublesome in cattle country and in the mountains as far north as New York, Idaho, and Montana. Some are carriers of a dangerous tick fever, particularly those found on the west side of Bitterroot Valley in Idaho, some from where they are occasionally carried on cattle to other localities. One of my best friends died in 3 days from the bite of a tick he received in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Vaccination with spotted fever serum is sometimes used as a preventative. Chloromycetin has dramatically controlled this fever within 24 hours. Ticks in the United States are bothersome only in spring and summer, but in some tropical areas they are all-year pests. They cling to the tops of tall grass and weeds. When you brush by, they attach themselves to you and prowl around until they find a favorable spot to dig their heads into and suck blood. What can be especially dangerous, according to Dr. Thomas J. Gray, is the penetration of a gravid female at the base of the skull. There, the egg-laden tick, concealed by the hair, can remain unsuspected until perhaps a disturbing stiffness of the neck motivates a closer inspection. Respiratory paralysis and even death are grave possibilities if the tick is not discovered and all parts removed. They usually do not fasten in for some hours, however, and when I was exploring in Panama, they always took a bath late each afternoon and de-ticked each other. In this way, almost never did we have a tick burrow in. Before they fasten themselves, you can easily remove them by passing a sharp knife between them and your skin. If they have taken a firm hold, the heat from a lighted match or cigarette will cause them to back out. So usually we'll dubbing them with kerosene, gasoline, alcohol, or the terry substance from a pipe stem. Attempts to pull or unscrew them from their holds are not so good, sometimes leaving parts of the head behind to cause irritation, if not serious infection. They should never be crushed to remove them. Even after they have been taken off intact, the common practice of squeezing or mashing them with the fingers is to be discouraged because of the danger of infectious organisms being absorbed by the body. Heat from a match or ember will explode them in an instant. A troublesome bite can be lanced 1/8 of an inch deep and suction applied for 20 minutes. A hot Epsom salt poultice, if not too irritating to the particular individual, may help if left on about half to 3/4 of an hour. An antihistamine ointment affords relief to some. You can also apply some antiseptic such as an aqueous solution of merthiolate, cover with a sterile pad, and bandage. Black flies. In the northeastern United States and in wooded eastern and central Canada, black flies can be equally annoying as mosquitoes from spring until about late August. They are about 1/3 the size of houseflies, and they bite chiefly at the back of the neck, ears, and face. With me, their bites cause more pain and inflammation than those of mosquitoes. Punkies, midges, no-see-ums, so diminutive you can scarcely see them, are also often prevalent, especially at dawn and dusk where there is no wind to blow them away. These microscopic menaces, capable of going through all but the finest netting, will have you scratching before you even realize what is the matter. Although they are extremely annoying when about, their bites are rather insignificant. The measures you take to avoid mosquitoes will also be effective with these other venomous legions. With the old dopes, flies used to be almost implausible nuisances along the salmon streams of the Northeast. We looked up while casting in one and another woodland pond and seen hatch after hatch of them moving upriver in narrow black streaks all day. Then at night came the mosquitoes. The new repellents have given today's fishermen a brighter outlook. Houseflies. The ordinary housefly is a common carrier of many disease germs, particularly typhoid. In the old familiar pattern, it lights on human or animal excreta and other refuse such as garbage, then carrying the germs on its feet, it investigates what is going on in the dining department. All food, as well as all cooking and eating utensils, should be protected from flies in camp, either by keeping them in fly-proof containers or by covering them with cheesecloth. Fly sprays are also effective, but they should be kept away from food dishes and, incidentally, from open flame. Special precautions should be taken in camps around civilization and those that are maintained in one spot for more than a few days. Latrines and garbage pits should be provided and these screened or darkened against flies. Deposits should be covered at once with dirt or ashes. The use of disinfectants is also effective. Garbage, including cans, should first be burned and flattened, should be placed in such a pit and covered with dirt, not just dumped into the ground. Bottles should be broken and then deeply buried. It is highly desirable that the wild places remaining on this battered globe be kept unspoiled and clean, so that they will not lose too soon their attractiveness and their spiritual and aesthetic values. At home, some people have been accustomed to paying garbage men and caretakers to keep their surroundings clean and sanitary. Some others scatter their litter in neighbors' gardens and along streets and country roads, where it may also eventually removed. Entirely too many forget that in wild terrain there is no one to clean up after them. As a consequence, cast-off clothing, scattered papers, rotting food, and other debris of every sort imaginable are sometimes seen. Along dry stream beds and along trackless deserts, you can always tell these days where an automobile can penetrate by a trail of rusting beer cans and slowly disintegrating facial tissues. Any camper can do worse than copy the woodchuck, who is one of our cleanest animals, although most unjustly called a groundhog. His burrow never smells of anything but clover, grass, and clean earth. In it he is a blind alley at the end of which he deposits all refuse and covers it with earth. Remember that you are camping in God's clean country. Leave it as pure and unspoiled as you found it, and do not make it look like hell. Take good care of yourself and take good care of the places where you pitch your shelter. You'll return home healthier, and you and those who follow you will always have fine places in which to kindle your campfires.